Hey guys, today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite books that I read in 2021. So yeah, let's get going with my favorite books of the year. I always love doing these videos at the end of every year, kind of just reflecting on all the great books that I read, and I think I read a pretty good amount this year, you guys. As I always do, I always try to do the 50 book challenge on Goodreads, and I actually managed to go beyond 50 books this year, which I have not done in quite a little while, you guys. It's been, I've had a streak of a couple years that I just barely get to 50 books. But yeah, for the first time in several years, I finally got past 50 books. So yeah, I think I read a pretty healthy amount of books that will make this list rather nice, I think. And as I always do when I talk about my favorite books of any given year, I always divide it up into two categories. I always do my favorite books that were published within that year. So for instance, that would be 2021. Any book that was published in 2021 is going to be on its own little separate list. And then I also split up books, just brand new books that are new to me that were published before 2021, but I am just now getting around to. And then I'm also going to do, or rather introduce a third category this year. I don't know if this is going to be a continuing thing, but the third category that I'm going to do this year are my favorite rereads. Because this year, one of my big goals for the year 2021 was to reread quite a number of books. I wanted to reread at least one book every single month, which I did. So yeah, I wanted to do a category just celebrating some of my favorite rereads, books that I had a really great time re-experiencing. So yeah, that's how this video is going to be divided up into 3 different categories. Hopefully this won't be too terribly lengthy. Let's get going. So the first category that I'm going to start off with is going to be books that are brand new to me, books that were published pre-2021. So yeah, the very first book that I'm going to be talking about at number 5, you know, that's something I forgot to mention. Each of these categories, I picked 5 books per category. So yeah, at number 5 for this category is going to be As Old as Time by Liz Braswell. I read quite a number of Disney books this year, you guys, especially from the Twisted Tales series. So it was kind of at least one book from the series was bound to wind up on this list. So yeah, my favorite Twisted Tales book from this Disney series that I read this year is As Old as Time. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling of a sort. And what the Twisted Tales books do so brilliantly is they ask this whole what if question. They kind of change and shift one big key thing that you know about your favorite Disney animated cartoon or whatever. So this book is, what if Belle's mother is the one who cursed the beast, meaning she was the mysterious enchantress. I loved that twist. It was great. It definitely did some really unique and interesting things to the story. For the most part, the story did remain the same. You know, what you love about Beauty and the Beast is pretty much in here. But yeah, there are some little shifts and turns, especially in regards to the very end of the book, pretty much the last third, if you will. That's where a lot of the big shifting moments come into play that really change up the story in ways that you're not really quite expecting, because when I was reading this book, I mean, I was expecting the end to kind of turn out to be the same how the cartoon is, but it kind of does a few little different things there that I was a little surprised about, but it was risky. It was risky. It took some chances, and I actually like that. Because a lot of the Twisted Tales books, as much as I do love the Twisted Tales series, a lot of them didn't take enough risks, enough chances, and I think this book is the one that I've read so far that took the most risks and chances, and they worked for me personally. So yeah, it ended up on my list this year. At number 4 is The Crown. Not Netflix's The Crown, you guys. Don't get excited. This is The Crown by Nancy Bilyeu. This is historical fiction taking place during the Reformation under King Henry VIII in England. And this was a really pleasantly surprising book, you guys. I really ended up really enjoying it. It was like a really great thrill ride from start to finish. Just a lot of really great history. Not just history during the Reformation, but some of the additional plot that's kind of going on also also goes back to like much further into English history, which was really great, how that was kind of incorporated into this. But yeah, what this book is about, it follows a young woman. She's a nun, and she is given this mission by the rather perhaps sinister Bishop of Winchester, Stephen Gardner. He wants her to go on this mission to hunt down this apparently, like, how to describe it, like mystical, magical, supernatural crown. It's all very vague and mysterious, and this crown belonged to like the early Saxon kings and whatnot. And that's what I mean by this kind of also exploring, like going back further into English history with the Saxons and whatnot. So Joanna is her name. Joanna has to track down this magical crown if she can, and what the Bishop of Winchester is telling her is that this crown might have these magical properties to somehow, guys, just go with me here, somehow end the Reformation under King Henry VIII, because this is a really turbulent time in history between the Catholics and the Protestants. So yeah, Bishop of Winchester, he thinks, yeah, maybe we can make things better with this magical crown. Is there really a magical crown? That's up to you to decide and kind of make your way and journey with Joanna through this book and whatnot. And it is, this book, it's not like the most wild and crazy, most amazing book in the world, you know. Like, it is more of like kind of a thrill ride, mystery. It definitely has more of those vibes, like a Dan Brown book, for instance. If you love things like Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code and whatnot, this is definitely more like that type of book, you know, more so than like your standard historical fiction. But I personally really liked this book. At number 3, Clanlands by Sam Heughan and Graham McTavish, stars of Outlander. And they wrote a book together. And this whole book, you guys, if you love the Outlander TV show, if you love Sam Heughan and Graham McTavish, like I said, who star on that show, this is going to be the book for you, I think. This is definitely targeting the Outlander female demographic, let me put it that way. This was such a fun book, you guys. It's funny, hilarious, just kind of bizarre in places. The relationship between these two guys, it's great. They have a great romance, a great working relationship, and what also kind of just nicely balances out this dynamic is, you know, because Sam Heughan is younger, Graham McTavish is older, so there's almost like this father-son sort of dynamic going on as well that really adds to the hilarity. Yeah, this whole book, all it's about is Sam Heughan and Graham McTavish going on this journey around Scotland, essentially. They're going to historic locations and meeting people who specialize in certain fields around Scotland. Like the little subtitle here says, whiskey, warfare, and a Scottish adventure like no other, you know. They're just doing it all in Scotland, just witnessing the culture, the people, the history, and it's a lot of fun, and it's really entertaining, and I think a little bit educational in places, especially if you don't know all the nitty-gritty about Scottish history. These two actors make Scottish history really fun and engaging, I think. At number 2, The Boleyn King Trilogy by Laura Anderson. Now, just a quick disclaimer, the very first book in this trilogy, The Boleyn King, I have actually read a very, very long time ago, but then I never finished the series. So finally this year, I got around to finishing the series, you guys. So yeah, this was actually a reread, the first book, but books 2 and 3 were totally brand new. I didn't know where the story was going. But yeah, I freaking love this trilogy, you guys. It's not perfect, you know, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh wow, it's perfect and amazing, you know, but there's just something about it that I really, really love, and I find very fascinating and interesting, because what Laura Anderson does with this book is she's basically changing up history a little bit, and she's telling an alternative history, because the big thing about this book, it's questioning, okay, what if Anne Boleyn, who was the second wife of King Henry VIII, what if she ended up giving him the much needed son and heir that he needed? Because if you know your history, Anne Boleyn, all she was able to produce was Elizabeth, which Elizabeth ended up being the greatest monarch of the Tudor monarchy, essentially, and many consider her to be one of the greatest queens of just English history in general. But yeah, Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth was it. She was never able to produce a living male heir, and then, as we know, Anne Boleyn did get beheaded, and King Henry VIII went on to have some more wives. So yeah, this alternative history is Anne Boleyn, she has produced a male heir, and what does this do to the future of the Tudor dynasty and whatnot? Where does it go? And I found that really captivating and interesting, you guys, because I've always had those thoughts, I've always had those thoughts. So, what if there had been a male heir? What would that have meant for Princess Elizabeth, Princess Mary? What would that have meant for just all these other random people kind of down the line and whatnot? Just not even future kings and queens, just regular other people that were around Henry VIII and whatnot, And I love this whole trilogy. And it primarily does focus on the male heir. He goes by Henry the Ninth in this book and whatnot. And yeah, he has his sister Elizabeth with him. He has his two friends who are fictional. In this book, they're fictional. They were never real people. He has two best friends, a guy and a girl. Of course, there's a little bit of a love triangle that starts up between King Henry the Ninth and his best friend. Starts liking the girl that he likes and everything. There are elements of this trilogy that start to turn into like a CW show, and it gets a little just too much. But once it kind of gets over that and calms down, this trilogy I think is really just so good, you guys. And I just can't repeat enough. Just captivating and really thought-provoking. Because if you're the type of person like me and you've ever wondered, hey, what if we had a Henry the Ninth? This is definitely the trilogy for you. And at number 1, I have the Lord John Grey series by Diana Gabaldon. I read all the books in this series, you guys, and Lord John Grey is one of my favorite supporting characters within the Outlander universe by Diana Gabaldon, you guys. So yeah, when I found out I think years ago that there was a Lord John Grey spin-off series, I was like, hell yes, give it to me. I want to read it. So I did. I finally got around this year to reading this whole series, and yeah, if you're like me, Lord John Grey is one of your favorite supporting characters, you're definitely, I think, going to really love and appreciate this whole series. And it does. It just follows Lord John Grey kind of during a period of time that we don't really see him, focusing, definitely away from the main characters of Jamie and Claire within the Outlander universe and whatnot. I think what this series did so great was just really enhance his character, because within the Outlander books, he kind of just pops up randomly every so often, and you never really totally get a good sense of his character, I feel like. So what I loved about this whole series is that you get to spend every waking moment with this guy and who he is, what he's all about, because he's a very duty-bound guy, all about loyalty, king and country or whatever. I really love his character in this, and just really going into the complexities of his character, because as you know if you know anything from the Outlander books, Lord John Grey, he is actually a gay character. He's in love with the main character from the main series, but it's unrequited. It goes unrequited, and yet Lord John Grey is a character that's living in a time period where he can't be open and honest about his feelings and whatnot. Plus, add on top of that, he's a military man, which is also another big problem. So that's a no-no. He can't be gay, So I love just this whole series exploring the vast complexities of his character and how interesting he is. And yeah, he has his pros, but he also has his cons. There's a lot of interesting factors, I think, in regards to his character and whatnot. And I thoroughly loved these Lord John Grey books. If Diana Gabaldon decides to write some more, I'll read them. Next, I'm going to be moving on to the books that were published within the year of 2021 that I got around to. So at number 5, I have The Charmed Wife by Olga Grushin. And, at first I wasn't quite sure if this book was going to make my top 5 of the list, to be quite honest, because I had a pretty rough patch with it when I first read this book, because I think I read it back in February, if I'm not mistaken. I had a pretty rough patch with this book, kind of a love-hate relationship with it, but it's one of those books that once I got to the very, very end of the book, it's like I kind of reevaluated everything that I knew about the book, and I started to appreciate the book in a very different way than I originally had. So yeah, The Charmed Wife. What is this book about? It's essentially about Cinderella, who has now been married for quite a number of years to her Prince Charming, but things have gone downhill. And she no longer wants to be with her Prince Charming. She's fed up with her life. So she goes out into the woods to meet with a witch because she wants to get a poison to kill her Prince Charming. You guys, uh-oh, not good for Prince Charming. I loved that this book was exploring what's after happily ever after, because fairy tales and Disney and whatnot, they always stop at the marriage ceremony. You know, we see our two leads get married, they go off, blah blah blah, but we never see what happens. And this book is definitely exploring what's after happily ever after, and that sometimes it doesn't remain happily ever after. This definitely explores the realities, the very harsh realities of what marriage is, what life is in marriage and whatnot. And seeing Cinderella as a grown woman now, because is she in her 40s? I'm trying to remember if she's in her 40s in this. I can't remember if she's like in her late 30s or 40s. But yeah, Cinderella having to deal with life as she's approaching middle age, and she's not happy with her life, and she's a very dark character in this. She's full of a lot of turmoil. She's rather seriously depressed and whatnot. So this book is definitely exploring some very, very interesting things that I found really great, that retellings like this never go into, you know? So yeah, if that sounds like your sort of thing, I think you'll really, really like this, because it definitely gets you thinking. And this book is definitely, I think, when I went into this book, and I think most people go into this book expecting this book to kind of be a certain way, but there is a gigantic, massive flip, I'll say, when you get to kind of the last little bit of this book. And that, like I said, that's what really changed my feelings and opinions about this book, is that flip at the very end of this book that caused me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about this book, and really think very, very differently about it, which I actually ended up appreciating. Is it going to work for everybody? No, but it worked for me. At number 4, Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This is another book I wasn't quite sure if it was going to make my list, but I kind of was thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? I ended up liking this, I think, more than I feel like I did. This is a retelling of Greek mythology following the story of Ariadne. Ariadne was a princess of Crete in mythology, and her big thing that she's most well known for is helping the hero Theseus escape the labyrinth that held the nefarious Minotaur, the Minotaur being actually her brother. And I think for the most part, I think a lot of people, that is what they are the most familiar with in regards to mythology when it comes to Ariadne. So I think one of the biggest joys and most interesting things about this book is, well, what happens after the labyrinth and the Minotaur? What happens with Ariadne and Theseus and whatnot? Where do they go? Where does her story go specifically? Because a lot of that I didn't know about. So I was kind of learning a lot of new stuff and learning about some new mythology that I wasn't totally aware of. Because like I said, all I knew about Ariadne was the labyrinth and the Minotaur, you guys, which I'm ashamed to say. So I did. This is definitely like a feminist retelling of Ariadne, really putting her at the heart and core of the story, really diving into her feelings. She's a complex, very interesting character. I love that this book just explores all the various different relationships in her life, whether that's with her sister or with Theseus or with another character, Dionysus, who is a Greek god. Yeah, a lot of really great things going on in this book, and definitely an ending that's like, wow, I was not expecting that, because once again, it's part of mythology that I wasn't totally aware of. So there was a lot of twists and turns to this that I was like, wow, that was great. So yeah, if you love Greek mythology retellings, I think you'll really like this. At number 3, I have another bit of mythology here, but this comes from Norse mythology, and this is The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. Wow, you guys, I freaking loved this book. Like I said, this is Norse mythology focusing on the witch Angrboda, who for most people from Norse mythology know her as essentially like the wife, one of the wives anyway, one of the wives of the trickster god Loki, and she has his 3 children, Hel, who becomes like queen of like the underworld in Norse mythology essentially, Fenrir the wolf, and Jormungandr the world serpent and whatnot. And yeah, if you know your Norse mythology, once again, Hel, Jormungandr, and Fenrir are all a big part of Ragnarok and whatnot, which is the Norse version of the end of the world. Seriously guys, wow, this book, I was prepared to not like this book when I first started it, because I was a little worried. I was like, sometimes mythology retellings can be very, very hit or miss with me. But this ended up being just really exceeding my expectations, and I loved it immensely. Just the world building of it, and really making Norse mythology accessible, I think, and very easy to understand, because Norse mythology is just really bizarre and confusing and complicated, you guys. But this book really tied in all the miscellaneous stories within Norse mythology just so cleverly and brilliantly together, in just really unique, interesting, and well done ways, that I just ended up really just absolutely appreciating this book. And loving these characters and just all the complexities within the various different relationships and whatnot. So yeah, very much like Ariadne, this is definitely just another feminist retelling on this particular woman from mythology and whatnot, and very well done, I think. At number 2, The Second Mrs. Astor by Shauna Abe. And you guys, if you know me, I love all things Titanic. I will devour anything that mentions anything with the Titanic. And what was really just special about this book, you guys, is that this book focuses on the very short-lived love story between John Jacob Astor and Madeline Astor. If you know what happens on the Titanic, obviously the Titanic hits an iceberg. It sinks. John Jacob Astor, who at that time was like one of the most freaking wealthiest men in America at the time, he did perish. His body was found, like, I think a week after the fact, once, you know, some rescue crews were out there trying to, you know, get some of the bodies that were still out there. So yeah, John Jacob Astor did die, leaving his very, very, very young and pregnant wife, a widow, Madeline Astor. Yeah, I just really adored this book, you guys. It may not be for everybody, but for me, I just loved it, because I have always wanted a historical fiction book about Madeline Astor. I've just always been kind of obsessed with her for some reason, and I've always just found her so interesting, because there's so many books about the Titanic out there. You know, there are just numerous millions of historical fiction books out there, but it's like I've never gotten a Madeline Astor book. You know, it's like, was it so much to ask for? So I finally got one. Yes, this is a very romanticized version and look at John Jacob Astor and Madeline Astor. But I kind of didn't mind that, you know. I just kind of read this, you know, this great romance between the two of them, this equalness between them, this partnership. I just really liked it. It's probably not entirely historically accurate, you know, probably definitely far and away from being historically accurate, but I just liked seeing their romance and their journey together, you know, knowing it was all going to end in doom and gloom, knowing there's an iceberg coming at some time in their future. But yeah, I love this book, you guys. I definitely recommend it if you love all things Titanic. And at number 1, A Tip for the Hangman by Allison Epstein. Wow, you guys, I don't even know what to say about this book. I freaking loved this book. It has a great cover, for starters. It has a great story. Let me tell you about what the story is. I'm sitting here just going automatically into, oh my god, I love this book. This book takes place in Elizabethan England, and it follows Christopher Marlowe. You guys, yes, that Christopher Marlowe, the popular playwright of this time, you know, alongside, you know, William Shakespeare and whatnot. So the big thing that's going on in this book It's following Christopher Marlowe, and he is approached by Walsingham, who is like one of Queen Elizabeth's spy masters at this time. And Walsingham is like, hey, Christopher Marlowe, I want to recruit you as a spy, you know, be part of my spy ring and whatnot. And I want you to get close to Mary, Queen of Scots, and I want you to figure out if she's making a move to take down Queen Elizabeth and whatnot. And I was like, hell yes, I'm all for this book, you guys. I just loved how Christopher Marlowe was integrated into this book, how he became a spy. Was he historically a spy? No one knows. There's lots of theories and rumors that maybe he was, because if you do know anything about the history of Christopher Marlowe, he died rather mysteriously. No one has ever been really able to figure out kind of the circumstances of his death and whatnot. And so yeah, this book is definitely exploring, did his death have something to do with the fact that he was a spy, you know, and other spy factions were coming after him, you know, because he knew too much, you know. So that's what this book is definitely kind of exploring. Wow, you guys, I love this book. It was just so incredibly well written. It just felt very atmospheric. I felt immersed into the Elizabethan era. I love this depiction of Christopher Marlowe. I loved all the various different relationships in his life. He's a very complex character and whatnot. He has a lot of self-doubt and I think self-loathing on occasion, and he struggles with being a playwright, you know. And yeah, balancing that out on, hey, I have to do some spying on the side, you know. I just love this book. Yes, I can't gush about it enough. I feel like this is just one of the most underrated books of 2021. And I even mentioned this when I did a historical fiction 101 video on the Goodreads nominees for historical fiction. I was just so devastated that Tip for the Hangman did not make the list because I just thought this was just one of the best historical fiction books that I read all year last year. Like I said, incredibly well written, just beautiful, just the language of this, the way it's written. It's not too flowery, it's not too descriptive, it's kind of just enough, you know, just enough to really give you a sense of this era, you know, kind of this grittiness and rawness of the era, and I loved it immensely. And then the last category, moving on to my favorite rereads of the year. At number 5, The White Russian by Tom Bradby. This is just, I'm going to say this about all of my books, I think, that they're all favorites of mine. I love this book. You guys, it takes place on January 1st of 1917 in St. Petersburg, right outside the Tsar's Winter Palace. The chief investigator, Sandra Rusky, he is called to the scene on the River Neva, and 2 dead, mutilated bodies are found on the river right outside the Tsar's Winter Palace. So this whole book, it's a mystery thriller, a political thriller. Our chief investigator is trying to figure out who this ruthless killer is there political motivations behind it and whatnot. And it's essentially a race against the time because this is set during the dying days of Imperial Russia. Everything is slowly collapsing and decaying around these characters, and it's just a wild ride, you guys. I love it. Tom Bradby's research is just so meticulous and well done. You feel part of this environment. It's so hugely atmospheric, whether atmospheric in a sense of it you feel very cold while you're reading it because there's just snow and ice everywhere, or just atmospheric in the political sense. I really feel like Tom Bradby captures the political atmosphere of this time, and the fact that things are kind of crumbling around everybody. So yeah, if you've never read this book and you love all things Imperial Russia, please pick this book up. At number 4 is Mouse by Art Spiegelman. This is a Holocaust nonfiction graphic novel, and it follows author Art Spiegelman, who is telling his father's survival story at Auschwitz during the Holocaust and whatnot. This is just such a harrowing, gripping, intense story, all told through a graphic novel format. It really makes this story accessible to especially to people who perhaps are not really big readers, and like maybe graphic novels are kind of their thing, you know. The storytelling in this is just so beautiful and heartbreaking and really touches you in certain places. And it's also surprisingly hilarious in some places, which you wouldn't expect for a work about the Holocaust, you know. But yeah, if you love Holocaust nonfiction, I definitely recommend this. It was a pleasure to reread this book and re-experience it and just really kind of get into that emotional space again with this book. At number 3, Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden. I just adore this book, you guys. Oh my god, this is just one, I think this is one of the most beautifully crafted books that I have ever read. Just the language of it, the flow and the style, just as you're reading this book, there's just such a beautiful just way with the words and the language. It's really hard to describe. I just love the power of the words and language in this book. Memoirs of a Geisha, it follows a young woman who at a very young age, she's sold into a geisha house in Japan, essentially, where they're not really like prostitutes. Prostitutes is like a really demeaning word. You never call a geisha a prostitute, because that is not what they are. But she becomes a geisha, and this whole book is about her life as she's training to be a geisha and her determination to be one of the best and most popular geisha in Japan and whatnot. And her primary goal in doing this is because her whole life she's actually had a huge crush on this man who is kind of really only ever referred to as the chairman for the most part. So this book is not only about her journey, but it's also about her kind of unrequited love for this man who she feels like doesn't really even acknowledge her existence sometimes, you know. It's just such a beautiful, powerful story, a love story. Once again, I could just go on and on about just the language of this book. It's just so beautifully, wonderfully descriptive. It's like if you're a bookworm, it's like, oh, this is everything you could hope for. At number 2, Interview with the Vampire. I just loved rereading this book again this year, you guys. I used to read it all the time in October for the spooky Halloween season. So I was determined I'm going to read this book in October like I used to. I love this book, you guys. It is kind of like just the most essential vampire fiction out there. I think after Dracula, Dracula being number 1, obviously. But if you love all things vampire, this book is definitely where you need to go to next. Like as soon as you're done with Dracula, before you head into like something like Twilight, maybe. Nothing against Twilight. I do like Twilight, you guys. This story, it follows a vampire, obviously. His name is Louis, and he is being interviewed by this young man, and this young man wants to know, hey, I know you're a vampire somehow. Tell me your life story. How'd you become a vampire? What's your life been like, for living for hundreds of years? So that's all this book is about, really. It's the life of Louis, his life as a vampire, how he meets other vampires, characters like Lestat and Claudia and Armand. They all pop up in this book, and just such a rich, vast universe and whatnot. Just fantastic vampire lore. It's a dark and gritty book about life and death and despair and grief and whatnot. There's a lot of emotional themes in this book that's why I appreciate this book. I appreciate the complexity of this story. Really giving complexity to the world of vampires and this unique look into the world of vampires that I think a lot of times we glamorize, hey, the life of vampires sounds so great, I would love to live an immortal life, but yeah, this book is like, nope, I don't think you want to live an immortal life, because it sounds pretty depressing. And at number 1, you guys, my favorite reread of 2021 was definitely The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I consider The Book Thief to be just my top favorite book of all time, you guys. If somebody was to ask me, hey, what's your favorite book? Book Thief. No hesitation. This book takes place in World War II, in Germany, following everyday Germans, and it follows a little girl who loves to just take off and steal miscellaneous random books, and she learns to read and discover the power of reading and whatnot. And guys, this is just such a beautiful story. One of the most beautiful, haunting stories if you love books, if you love all things books, this is definitely the book for you, because it's about a little girl who loves books and whatnot. And yeah, a lot of this novel is about, like, once you kind of get into it deeply and whatnot, a lot of this book has to do about the power of language and words, because obviously Hitler being in power during this time, and Hitler using the power of his words and his language to really rile people up into such hate and prejudice during this time period. And yeah, the little girl in this Liesel really discovering the power of words, you know, that one man is using words for hatred and prejudice, but words can also be good, can be used for good and hope and happiness and love and whatnot. It's such an emotional journey of a book, you guys. I read it every time. It brings me to tears, especially the final freaking line of this book is just the best ending line of this entire book. Yeah, it's a book I can easily reread over and over and over again. So you guys, that is it for my favorite books that I read in the year of 2021. I always love doing this video at the end of every year. So in the comments below, what books have you guys read back in 2021 that were your favorite reads? I would definitely love to hear your thoughts and opinions. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.